I couldn't help but feel a surge of hope for him, and for the first time since the fire, I smiled for real. Chapter 3: Reasons Cecilia Murray should be allowed to have a dog. Number 1. I have proved how responsible I am with dogs by volunteering at Orphan Paws for 8 whole months. Number 2. I will always walk and feed the dog. Dad will never have to. Number 3. Dogs bark and warn about intruders equals free house security. Also, they bark when the house is on fire and the owner is in the closet. Number 4. Since Melody left him alone all the time. Number 5. I'm better with dogs than with people. Chapter 3, Honestly, Cecilia. Honestly, Cecilia, Aunt Pamela said, and then exhaled loudly. Honestly, Cecilia is how she always started off talking to me. If I'd gone to live with her when I was really little, I'd probably think it was my name by now. Aunt Pamela was driving me to school so Dad could talk to the fire people again. I sat back in the seat and tried to remind myself that living with Aunt Pam wasn't all bad. For one thing, she made the absolute best waffles. I couldn't remember the last time I'd had a fancy breakfast on a school morning. My aunt is my dad's older sister. She's very protective of Dad, so she doesn't like it when I make his life less easy, which, since I'm his kid, is pretty much every day. I just have to ask, Cecilia, what were you thinking sitting up there in the dark on the floor? I snapped back out of my waffle coma to hear what my aunt was asking me. You had an entirely perfectly decent house to sit in, and you picked the closet? I just don't understand. I thought about telling her it wasn't dark in there. After all, I had a string of purple battery-operated LED lights. But it didn't seem like a terrific idea to tell my aunt that I not only hung out in my closet, but I also decorated it. I'm sorry, I didn't hear the sirens. Aunt Pam made a sound as she pulled up to the stoplight. Meanwhile, to make myself feel better, I thought about Little Potato and the speedy recovery I was sure he was making over at Orphan Paws. I was so excited to see him again after school that day. Aunt Pam looked over at me. You know, we really need to do something about all this. She swept a hand up and down like she was Windexing a window or something. All of what? I asked. Well, she stalled, but it was a very brief hesitation. First, your clothes. Obviously, though that may be up to your father. I'll speak to him. Second, there's your hair. What's wrong with my hair? I instinctively touched my straight brown hair. It just needs more shape. Okay, I mumbled, crossing my arms and slouching in the passenger seat. We were just 2 blocks from school, so I was sure she was about to run out of time to list all of my faults. I gave a big sigh. What else? Excuse me? Aunt Pam sputtered in surprise. I'm just saying we might as well get it all over with, I said. Honestly, Cecilia, she began, and I interrupted her. Why are we talking about the shape of my hair? My house almost burned down 2 days ago. I felt bad talking back to Aunt Pam, but I was so frustrated I couldn't help it. Don't be overdramatic, Cecilia. The damage was confined to the kitchen and living room. It's half the house, I told her, sinking even lower into the car seat. Well, I suppose it is, but your father's meeting with the fire chief. I'm sure they'll let him know when it's safe to return. It will be quite a job cleaning it up. Do they know who started it? I asked, glad for once that I wasn't allowed to have candles in my room. Something electrical. Aunt Pam waved a hand dismissively. It wasn't anyone's fault. But what about all my stuff? I hadn't let myself think too much about the contents of my room yet. At first, I'd been embarrassed at having to be rescued. Then I was just relieved Dad was okay. After that, I was dealing with the fact that I might have to stay with my aunt for an unknown length of time. Then after last night, I'd mostly been thinking about Potato. I'm sure we'll be able to get your things soon, Aunt Pam said. When she pulled up to the school, I sat up and grabbed my backpack from the floorboard. I opened the door. Thanks for the ride, I said, leaping out of the car. You're welcome, Cecilia. When does your school day end? I'll pick you up right here. Thanks, I'm working, I told her, accidentally slamming the car door in my haste. Cecilia, young ladies do not slam car doors. And what do you mean working? You have a job? I mean, I'm volunteering at the dog shelter. I told you all about it at Christmas, remember? Your father knows about this? Yep, I called over my shoulder, already jogging in hopes of not being late to science. I was also glad to be away from Aunt Pam. I raced through the front lobby all the way to my locker, grabbed my books for the first few classes, slammed the door, turned and ran right into something. Or someone. I fell backward, landing in a heap of papers and books. I looked up to see that I'd bumped into Eric Chung, who was possibly the most popular boy in 8th grade, with an attitude to prove it. Of all people to run into, Eric was already squatting down, gathering up some of his papers that had fallen over the hallway. Hey, are you okay? He asked. I'm fine, I yelled. That is, I realized I'd yelled once I saw Eric frown at me, looking confused and horrified. Somehow, in trying to make up for being out of it, I've overdone it with the volume. Honestly, Cecilia, said a voice in my head. Eric blinked. He handed me a stack of papers he'd gathered. Here you go, he said in a very cautious-sounding voice, like maybe he thought I was going to yell again. I'm sorry, I said, fixing my eyes somewhere around the collar of his t-shirt. For yelling, I mean. First the falling, then the yelling. I really just wanted to gather up the rest of my stuff and get out of there. I looked up. Eric's very dark eyes were looking into mine. He actually seemed more concerned than frightened now. Maybe he wasn't quite as big of a jerk as I'd always thought. He opened his mouth to speak again. I held my breath. He spoke very slowly. Did you maybe hit your head or something? He asked in a tone that suggested that I had not only hit my head, but maybe damaged my brain too. I let out the breath I'd been holding and closed my eyes. No, I answered, deciding that nice Eric had probably been some sort of mirage. I scrambled to my feet, brushing the hallway dust off my jeans. I realized I had made us both late for first period science. Eric turned and headed down the hall, and I hurried after him into the classroom. Mrs. Wilson glanced up from her podium in annoyance. It looked like everyone was already taking the quiz on the reading we'd done for homework. Then she saw it was perfect Eric walking in, and she smiled at him. When she saw me, she started to say my name, no doubt to ask me where I thought I'd been for the first 3 minutes of class. But Eric stopped her by saying, Cecilia was just helping me. I dropped my books. He zinged her with one of his I'm so awesome smiles. Oh, how annoying. The rules just didn't seem to apply to Eric Chung's of the world. After hesitating for a few seconds, Mrs. Wilson nodded, though she didn't exactly smile when she handed me my quiz. I slid into my seat in the back of the room. Mrs. Wilson had a seating chart, but somehow I'd gotten the seat I would have picked anyway. I started my quiz, and Eric in the front started his. His grade was probably going to be perfect, too. I realized then that in all the excitement of the fire and potato and everything, I'd forgotten to read the homework chapters, so I made up answers and waited until Mrs. Wilson called for us to pass our papers up, drawing Potato's little scrunched-up face in the margin and wishing the day would go faster so I could go see him. And as soon as 8th period ended, I dashed over to Orphan Paws. Even though it was raining and I'd forgotten my umbrella, I headed straight for Potato, but he wasn't in his crate. I felt an instant rush of panic. What if Lori had already adopted him out? He wasn't ready, I was sure. His cuts wouldn't have healed that fast. What about his ribs? If someone with the little kids took him, they'd be sure to let him move around too much. And I walked out the back door into the small patio. The sun was starting to break through the clouds, and the rain had stopped. I let out a relieved breath when I saw Potato sitting on the pavement, his leash tethered to a stake in the nearby grass. He saw me too and started to jump. I sat down beside him quickly, so he wouldn't have to move much. I picked him up and put him in my lap, lowering his head to kiss his soft ears, feeling happy for the first time all day. After we sat in the watery sunshine for a long time, I picked him up and checked each of his injuries. I changed the bandage on his ear, and he licked my face while I tried to replace it with a fresh bandage. I was giggling and trying to avoid Potato's wet tongue when Lori came in. I see you found your patient, she said, smiling. She was holding a clipboard. We just got in a new litter this morning. Left outside a church down the block. Some kid gave us a tip-off. That's nice. I was gently brushing Potato's back, one of the few spots with no injuries. Excuse me. Cecilia, 5 abandoned puppies isn't a that's nice situation. I frowned and looked up at her. Not the abandoned part, of course, but puppies are always nice is what I meant. Lori sighed. I suppose they are. Can you help me give them their shots? If you can tear yourself away from your buddy for there for a few minutes, that is. I petted Potato's head and laughed. Of course I can stay as long as you want. And we got out of school early on Wednesday, so I can totally help with the adoption fair. Great, Lori exclaimed, but in the next moment her expression changed. Cecilia, I want to tell you something. I worry about you. When I was your age, I used to go to the mall with my friends on early dismissal days, not help out at the adoption fairs with old ladies. I rolled my eyes. Lori was far from being an old lady, and she knew it. But she had a point about hanging out with my friends. I twirled one of Potato's ears, not looking up at her. I used to have someone to hang out with, Mel, but then she moved away. I guess Lori understood, even though I didn't say anything. Cecilia, when's the last time you talked to someone other than Mel? She asked me. My collision with the self-important Eric Chung floated through my brain. It's been a while, I admitted. Lori shook her head. I know the animals are easier, but you can't go with them to the mall. You definitely can't take them to a dance. I really wish I could, I said wistfully. Lori threw up her hands. I give up. I'll bug you about this later. For now, puppies. She headed back inside. I put Potato down and followed her. For the rest of the afternoon, I snuck back to check on Tater in between weighing and bathing and shot giving for the new batch of adorable little gray and black mutts. I'd planned ahead for when I had to leave Potato with some chicken-flavored cookies in a plastic baggie. I broke 2 of them into smaller pieces and put him inside his crate to distract him while I left. I knew if I could give him a positive association to go along with my leaving that he'd handle it better. Then, with Potato happily munching away, I headed out the back door of Orphan Paws, still thinking a little about what Lori had said. Chapter 4, of or relating to turtles. The next day was Tuesday, and I missed going to Orphan Paws after school because I had to meet with my team to work on a project for a history class. Allie Cross, the best student in our grade, and also one of the most popular, appointed herself the unspoken team leader. Allie had perfectly wavy blonde hair, and rumor had it she and Eric Chung had dated last year. Allie existed along with Eric, his twin sister Lily, and other good-looking girls and guys in a social circle that I could never imagine being a part of. Not that I wanted to be a part of it anyway or anything. Allie handed us all our assignments for the project, and I was supposed to write a section on the Dust Bowl. It didn't sound very fun, but I wasn't going to argue with Allie. When I got home, I started researching the Dust Bowl online and actually kind of got sucked in by what I read. Then I was surprised to hear the little Skype sound. I scrambled to click accept, and a few minutes later, there was Mel waving at me from across the miles. I felt a rush of joy. It was great to see Mel again for the first time in what I felt like forever. I missed how she always used big words and her fashion sense. Not only could she pick the perfect clothes for her own petite curly-haired self, she always helped me pick out the perfect shirt or earrings too. Today she was wearing a sparkly blue top that made her eyes look an even brighter shade of blue. "See," she cried, "I miss you. How you been?" she asked. I told her the whole entire story of the fire, and she gasped and asked all the same questions everyone kept asking, which led me to explaining that it was something electrical. It's no one's fault, and I had no idea when I'd be going home. "How could you not tell me any of this?" Mel asked, her voice going all high-pitched in her outrage. "It just happened," I told her. "Well, you still should have called me." And then there was me explaining for the billionth time that I'm practically the only kid in America without her own cell phone. Besides, I added, I had to go to the OP to help after school, and there was this dog there, and he's the cutest thing I've ever seen. "Cecilia," Mel rolled her big eyes. "Another dog? You gotta get out into the world of people. You're turning into a hermit. Not even calling your best friend when your house nearly burns down. You're getting positively colonian." Colonian? Of or relating to turtles or tortoises, Mel recited. Or in other words, you. Always crawling back into your shell where nothing can hurt you. Geez, that's very psychological. That fancy school might be ruining you. Mel sniffed. Not really. Compared to Pearson, everyone here is snooty. I can't go an entire day without someone scoffing at my PB&J or asking whether or not I drink coconut water. Her nose wrinkled. "But anyway, I'm really sorry about your house and all." She leaned closer and whispered, "I know how your aunt drives you crazy." I sighed. Yeah, she's kind of a lot. But at least we have a place to stay, I guess. Before I could continue, Mel started to look distracted, as if someone was talking to her off screen. "Sorry, C, I gotta go. My parents are taking me to cheer practice. The big game's coming up, so we're nearly doubling our practice time." "Okay," I said, trying not to look disappointed. "I really miss you," I added. My Skype sessions with Mel always felt way too short. "I miss you too, Turtle," Mel said. Wednesday started out gray and cold, but by the time the early release bell rang, the sun was shining. I raced the few blocks to the Legible Lion, the little bookstore on Vine Street where Lori's always had her adoption fairs. Her best friend Sally owned the store, which sold used books, coffee, and really delicious baked goods. We used little tables on the sidewalks to set up a few crates with the hopeful dogs, all cleaned up and groomed in search of their forever homes. We had the gray and black puppies I took care of on Monday, along with the chocolate lab mix and the black puggle. I was secretly glad that Lori had decided Potato needed some more time with us before we tried to find him a home. He was at the shelter by himself at the moment, but Mitch promised he'd check in on him every hour or so while we were out. I suspected Lori was stalling adopting him out for me in case my dad and I could go home soon, and in case after that I managed to get my dad to agree to let me have a dog. There were also 2 fluffy white cats. Lori usually specialized in dogs, but sometimes she made exceptions for other animals. After all, we were both suckers for a cute creature, no matter what kind. "Lori, have you ever had any turtles at the shelter?" I asked her, thinking of the conversation with Mel yesterday. What? Lori looked up from her notebook she was writing. And sorry, I'm just trying to work on the budget for next month. Would you mind going in and grabbing me an iced coffee from the cafe? She handed me a $5 bill. Get something for yourself, too. Sure thing. I rose from the lawn chair I'd been sitting in. The street was nearly empty. Lori probably didn't even need me to help her today. I ordered an iced coffee for Lori and a lemonade for myself. As I waited for the drinks, I thought about sneaking back over to the shelter to spend time with Potato instead. I walked back out to the sunshine, and handed Lori her drink. Then took a big sip of my lemonade. Yum. A family, mom, dad, older girl, and little boy, had come by and were asking Lori to show them one of the puppies. I'll get one out, I told Lori, who smiled at me gratefully. I slipped a harness into the sweetest of the 5 puppies, a little gray fellow I liked to call Oreo. Lori always told me not to name the dogs, but I never listened. Even if I never said the names out loud, I still thought of them, using the names I came up with. In addition to Oreo, the other 4 puppies at the fair were Peaches, Twinkle, Malamar, and Coconut. Coco for short. All in my head, of course. Clearly, I have a thing for food-themed names. The little girl snuggled Oreo against her and squealed happily. But when it was her brother's turn, the boy recoiled in fear, even though Oreo was just wriggling playfully in excitement. Just like that, Oreo lost his chance at a family. They wandered off a few minutes later. The mom thanked me, but the dad just looked relieved. I held Oreo as I watched him go. No matter how many times I've seen it happen, I still felt an ache for the poor orphan pup who just come so close to getting a home. Sorry, big guy, I told Oreo, kissing him at the top of his head and getting a big sloppy lick on my cheek in return. Instead of putting Oreo back in the big crate with his brothers and sisters, I carried him in and sat down inside the crate and let him all scramble over me. I giggled as all 5 tried to jump into my lap at the same time. I forgot all my troubles for a few minutes as I played with the puppies in the sunshine. A shadow fell over us and I looked up. Eric Chung was looking down at me. I couldn't make out the expression on his face. Oh, what's he doing here? I struggled to my feet, untangling myself from the pups, and crawled out of the crate. Once I was back on my feet, I realized Eric was standing there with a lady who was probably his mom. Now that his face was no longer hidden in shadow, I could tell that he was laughing at me. Of course. I stood up a little straighter. It really bothered me how superior Eric Chung was always acting. His family is super wealthy, and he never lets anyone forget it. He and Lily have these crazy fancy smartphones that are normally only available in Japan. And every time I see Eric use it at school during lunch, I swear I see a smug little smile on his face. Can we help you? I asked him, a hint of annoyance in my voice. Lori looked up from her coffee in surprise at my tone. Eric's grin faded a little. We're looking for a dog. Why would you look here? The words were out of my mouth before I could think. Everyone knew about the Chung's family dogs. There were a bunch of them, all famous for winning lots of dog shows. They were the 2 Chow Chows who always won the bigger prizes. Then there were 4 other dogs, a lab and 3 corgis, all purebred, of course, since non-purebreds aren't allowed to compete in dog shows. So it didn't make any sense why they'd come to Lori's adoption fair. I figured the Chungs only adopted fancy show-quality dogs, not strays off the street. Cecilia, Lori frowned at me. I'm sorry, she said to Eric and Mrs. Chung, who was petting the puggle on the head. Please just let me know if you'd like to see any of these little guys out of their crate. Mrs. Chung stood up. Thank you, she said to Lori. My son's looking for a particular type of dog. I gave a quiet scoff. Particular purebred, I thought. I'm hoping to find a full braid dog, Eric said to Lori, ignoring me. I'm training one of our dogs for the next local show, the Winstead Winter Circle. I'd like to try to prove to some people, he paused and looked at his mom, I like to prove that an adopted stray could win just like the dogs we get from the fancy breeders. Mrs. Chung rolled her eyes but smiled at her son. I don't know where he gets these ideas, she said to Lori. She patted Eric's shoulder. This one's crazy about animals, and he's such a big help to me. So I said he could try out this wild theory of his. She turned to Eric. I don't see any dogs today that fit what you're looking for. Maybe you could check back in a few weeks. Lori started to say, we may have, but then I shot her a warning lick. I'll keep a lookout for you. Now that I know what you're looking for, I'll check in with Mary Carlton over in Winchester. It's a bigger shelter. She smiled at Eric. It's always better to adopt than to buy. I must say, I think your son has the right idea. Mrs. Chang thanked Lori and started moving down the street. Eric nodded to Lori. He looked back at me for just a second before following his mom. It was sort of weird now he was looking for a stray dog to show. I thought as he walked away, but then I pushed the thought aside and started to help Lori pack up the dogs in her van. Eric probably just liked the idea of rescuing a stray. It wouldn't be long before his family was adopting another dog that cost more than a car and trotting it around a ring to win some fancy prize. His mom had said he was crazy for animals, but a crazy for animals person wouldn't have passed up all these adorable pups just so he could find the fanciest one to put on display. I breathed a sigh of relief that Potato, the only purebred dog we had right now, was safe and back at Orphan Paws. Not that Eric would have gone for him anyway, a poor pup with a torn ear who looked like, well, a potato. The image of a potato as a show dog was so funny I had to laugh out loud. What's so funny? Lori asked me. Oh, nothing. Are you going to tell me why you were rude to that boy? I wasn't. At least I didn't mean to be. Not exactly, anyway. He goes to my school, I told her. He's sort of, I trailed off, arrogant, stuck up. I just don't really like him is the thing. Lori stared at me for a few minutes. Why do I feel like there's more to this story? There isn't. He doesn't even know my name, I'll bet. If you say so, Lori said. She shut the back doors of the van. Hop in and I'll give you a ride to your aunt's. Lori cranked up the volume on her radio and we sang along the whole drive, so at least I didn't have to answer any more questions about Eric Chung. Had I been rude to him? Eric was annoying. But what if he had wanted one of the dogs we had today and I changed his mind by being so harsh? Maybe Mel was right. Maybe I was a turtle. Maybe all anyone could see of me was the hard shell on the outside. I go by many names. First, Cecilia Louise Murray, my birth certificate, my father if I'm in trouble. 2, Casmophile, Colonian, or whatever is on her word of the day calendar, Mel. Number 3, that girl over there, assorted kids in my class. 4, honestly Cecilia, Aunt Pamela. And 5, Arf, Potato. Chapter 5, There's no math in kickball. The next day I walked into third period math class to find out that Mrs. Lawrence, who was pregnant, had her baby 3 weeks early, so she was going to be out for the rest of the year. Our sub was named Mr. Garrett, but he told us to call him Chip. After going over decimals for 7 minutes, Chip asked the class if we wanted to start our homework or go outside to play kickball. Of course, all the loudmouths in the class yelled, "Kickball!" and started heading for the door. But there's no math in kickball, piped up Allie Cross. Lily Chung, Eric's twin sister, nodded her agreement. But it was too late. Chip was already out the door. When I walked by Allie's seat, she was angrily slamming her math book shut and muttering under her breath. I wasn't a fan of either math or kickball, but at least it wasn't very cold out, and this way I could put off the fun of fractions for a few more hours. When I got outside, I stood in the back of the group as Chip divided us into teams. Then I headed straight to my usual position, the extreme outfield. I stood there a few seconds pretending the sun was warmer than it actually was. "This stinks, huh?" came a voice from somewhere behind me. I jumped out of my skin, then whirled around. I really thought I was alone based on the fact that I had gone so far out I was almost playing kickball in a different school district. The owner of the voice chuckled a bit, but she ducked her head shyly at the same time. It was Lily Chung. I thought about how she and Eric didn't look that much alike. He was very tall, but Lily was very tiny. Lily had long, shiny black hair, while Eric's was short and spiky. Her skin was paler than Eric's, but that was probably because Eric was so athletic and spent a lot of time outdoors. Lily was usually pretty quiet in class, but just like her brother, she was popular. Probably didn't hurt that her family had a lot of money and lived in a huge house with, so it was reported, a movie theater and a one-lane bowling alley. Can I hide out here with you?" Lily asked. "Sure," I answered. I wonder if maybe Lily was just a little bit Chelonian too. Lily let out a relief sigh. "I just can't handle any more kickball. In gym class once, they made me play third base, and when the ball was coming toward me, everyone was yelling, and then everything was bad. She closed her eyes and shook her head. Let's just say I wound up in the nurse's office with an ice pack on my nose. I chuckled. "Sorry," I said. "I don't like it either. That's why I'm all the way out here, and I'm hoping nobody kicks one out this far." I turned to look back at our tiny classmates kicking far off in the distance. Chip seemed to be showing the pitcher how to really do things right. "You're not in any sport teams either, are you, Cecilia?" There was just a hint of hesitation as she said my name, like maybe she wasn't 100% sure that it was my name, or maybe I was just imagining that. "No, I'm garbage at sports, but I keep pretty busy working at Orphan Paws, the dog shelter." "Your parents let you have a job? Wow," Lily exclaimed. "Well, I just volunteer," I said. I was surprised at how easy it was to talk to Lily. I realized I had never spoken more than a couple of words to her before. "I have to help my mom with training sometimes. My mom is like obsessed with dog shows," Lily told me. Of course, I was already familiar with the Chung family dog show legend. I thought it was best not to mention the interaction I'd had with Eric and Mrs. Chung outside the bookstore. That's really cool you have a job of your own already, even if it's just volunteering, Lily went on. My brother would probably love it there. He helps my mom way more than I do. He's better with the dogs and everything. We both heard Chip calling us back at that moment and started walking toward the rest of the class. It was nice not playing kickball with you, I told her. You too, Lily said brightly. She ran over to join her usual friends on the way into the school building. I watched her go. Maybe Lily wasn't as snobby as I thought she was. I couldn't say the same about her brother, though. After school, I told Potato about Lily and math and kickball as I brushed his fur gently. When I'd gotten to Orphan Paws that day, of course, right away I asked Lori how the tater was doing. He's still improving a little each day, she told me, although I must admit, I think he does miss you while you're at school. I'd smiled, feeling a warm glow. Well, good. Your dad getting any closer to letting you have a pet, Lori had prodded gently. I knew why she was asking. She didn't keep any dog forever. And I knew that her husband had a strict policy about Lori not bringing home any more rescues from work. They already had 5 dogs. If I couldn't take Potato home with me, someone else would, and I knew I couldn't. We're still living with my aunt, I told her, feeling miserable. The timing was really bad, but I knew I'd need to work up the nerve to talk to my dad about Potato. Maybe if he said yes to me having a dog after we moved back home, Lori would hold him for me. I figured I'd earn that much. For the rest of the afternoon, though, I tried to put those fears out of my mind and just coo with the little Potato. He seemed a little less skinny already. You couldn't count every rib. I fed him little bits of hamburger I'd saved from lunch, and he licked all the grease from my palm. I fell asleep with Potato on my lap, and Lori had to wake us up. He didn't even cry when I left, thanks to 2 more chicken cookies. When I stepped outside, I was surprised to see Aunt Pamela's blue Volkswagen waiting for me. What's going on? I asked her. No emergency. I just came to pick you up. Thought I'd take you retrieve some of your things from the house. Retrieve some of my things? I repeated, suspicious. What's going on, Aunt Pam? Spill. She frowned at me and shot me a sideways look as she put the car into gear. Your father got the final word from the inspector today. The house, that is to say, you won't be returning. Aunt Pam, I broke in. Please tell me what's going on. All right, but I'm afraid it's bad news. I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but the house has been condemned. What do you mean condemned? I said slowly, pronouncing each word carefully, like I'd just learned how to talk. Aunt Pam kept her eyes firmly on the road ahead. Even though we were approaching a red light, finally she turned to face me. The fire department said there was too much damage. They brought in a home inspector. Well, it seems it would cost a lot more to bring it up to code than the property is actually worth. My chest felt tight. It had been a small old house, sure, but it was our house. And now it was all gone forever. My room, my closet, the spot at the stairway where I liked to sit and read and think about things, the little back porch where Mel and I used to lounge in the summer, painting our toenails, all of it gone. How? I guess I'd started to ask, how could something like this happen? But I couldn't get the rest of the words out past the giant lump in my throat. Cecilia, it'll be okay, I promised. You know, and you and your father can stay with me for as long as you need to. I knew she was telling the truth, but it wasn't a truth I wanted to hear. I just wanted to go home and have the chance to bring Potato there. Aunt Pam didn't have much to say after that. She drove me back to her old house. I packed up as much as I could. Most everything in my room was wet or damp and covered in a layer of ash. Nothing had burned up, but it was pretty clear that a lot of my clothes were done for. Everything, white or light colored, was definitely a loss. Dad had gone to the pack and ship place to get boxes, and he came in the front door, shuffling his feet and looking defeated. Your aunt told you the news, Dad asked me. Part of me wanted to tell him I wished he'd been the one to tell me about the house. Somehow Dad always managed to get out of doing the hard stuff. But he looked so down I couldn't bring myself to say it. So I settled for saying, yes, I can't believe that it's no more house. I'm so sorry, see. Dad's eyes met mine for just a moment before he turned and walked into his room. I took 2 boxes from the pile Dad had brought in and went back to my room to finish packing and clean up. But first I had to find the list of reasons I deserved a dog. The list I'd been planning to show Dad. I found it lying on my desk, balled up in my fist, and threw it. I balled it up in my fist and threw it in the trash.